I'm Mike Brofman, and welcome to Song and Wine, Brooklyn Art Song Society's web series where we sit around and drink wine and talk about art song. We are in season 3 of a little series, and I am joined today by John Moore, singer at the Metropolitan Opera Baritone, who will be joining me Friday, October 24th for opening night of Brooklyn Art Song Society's 5th season, and it's going to be an all Poulenc recital because we are doing a survey of the works of Les Six, and Poulenc is the most famous of those folk. Let's see if I can name all 6 of them on the spot. Georges Auric, Louis Duret, Darius Milhaud, Honegger, Arthur Honegger, Germaine Taillefer, and Francis Poulenc. I tried to do in alphabetical order, but I forgot about Honegger. But so we're going to talk a little bit about Poulenc today. So I think the first thing I wanted to talk about is what makes Poulenc Poulenc. You know, every composer has something about their music that, or every great composer has something about their music where you hear it and you're just like, that's that composer. You can tell right off the bat.
I think he's, well, I mean, I guess I don't know his instrumental music, to be honest, or his piano music. But the songs that I have perused or listened to or sung are distinct in that they marry, like his brush. It's like his brush is simultaneously painting in the piano, kind of a dreamscape and the wordscape. He does it's almost like they run in tandem. So it's like there's a singer on the street in some of these Apollinaire songs, so there's a singer on the street that's literally just accompanying the noises around him or something.
Yeah. I think Poulenc, in a nutshell, is about dichotomy. It's about things that sort of contradict each other being put together. And I think, the biggest contradiction of those is sort of high and low.
Yeah.
Like he loves taking, low art, like street art, or like the chanson galliard, sort of like folk songs, and elevating it to the level of art, or taking things that are supposed to be high art and like infusing it with pop, or infusing it with sort of low art elements. So right. I think that, to me, that's like the quintessential idea of Poulenc.
Yeah, and he talks about it in his biography. He's one of these guys that's born on either side of the river, the one side being wealthy and the other side being poor, working class, and he chose to live in the poor and working class areas and the artist areas. And I think that says a lot. If you think about the person and then you listen to the music, it makes sense. You see, in the time period with Picasso and Surrealism and Impressionists, all these things that are happening concurrently. It's no wonder, I guess, that in his music you have, in the Apollinaire, there's all this carnival music almost happening. In the Gaillard music, there's so much irony. I guess irony kind of runs throughout his music, but that is typical Poulenc, and it's I think typical of the time. He was one of these great composers that helped to elevate great writing. And, when you say, like, the other day I said something about the Apollinaire to a French person, and they said, oh, Apollinaire, it's like, there's the expression from a French person. I don't speak French, and I don't understand nuance, but she does, and the way that she said it wasn't, Apollinaire, it was, Apollinaire. Like, it's, the poet crushes you, and then you have, or kind of not crushes you, but sets you in a certain mood, and then you have Poulenc, like, upping the ante.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's really, the cool thing is it's distinct. It's like Stravinsky, it's like Schubert. It's distinct.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I always thought, I'm learning a whole bunch of Poulenc in rapid succession, and hearing it and listening to it, and looking at the scores. I think one thing I noticed in the score is Poulenc's the only composer I've ever seen in the score where he marks to not take time more than he marks to take time. All over the place he's like, no retard, no, strictly in time. He has it all over the place, and almost every other composer is the opposite all over, especially in his time period, in the sort of in the early 20th century, and I think I think that has to do with a lot of the things you touched on. I think one has to do with his sort of influence of pop music and sort of where, and with the beginning of like recorded music and electronic music in the sense of like amplified music, where there's a strictness of the time, because there's a drum, so any sort of making that. But I think it also has to do with the irony that you mentioned, because it's sort of, by not giving time, it's like it gives it a very deadpan, especially when there's humor in it. When there's no, it's like telling jokes without like making a big deal of the punchline. You just say it.
Yeah.
And I think and I think also Poulenc was, even though he was sort of almost like an anti-romantic, all of Les Six were sort of very much against what they saw as the sort of excessive emoting.
Yeah,
the Germanic style.
I mean, it's exceptional. It's exceptionally literal.
Mm-hmm.
I think is maybe a good way to say it, because approaching it, I think today I was reading Pierre Bernac. I think was it Apollinaire or Eluard, saying basically it's not something you can understand. It's and so like as an American and an English speaker, to be set in front of a piece like this, or have this piece put in front of you, and then to look at it, for me, it's a matter of, since I don't speak the language, it's a matter of connecting to the absurdity.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we've talked in the rehearsing about how to approach it, and it's the duty of the singer and the pianist is much, because all of the nuance that is sometimes, like you said, not necessarily called for, like get rid of it, or time, like don't mess with it, don't mess with what's already there. It begs you. It almost, and it's that romanticism almost that he was so maybe nervous about creeping in, that you would become sentimental or something about
insincere.
I mean, I think insincere is a better word. I mean, the Gaillard, but I don't know. The absurdity, the crassness, the perversion, if you want to call it that, in some of the work, when done not blandly, certainly because of the texture, the sounds that he's able to create, are pretty exceptional, but the almost deadpan delivery gives the audience or the listener, whether they speak it or are reading it from a translation, it perfectly, he's able to perfectly encapsulate that absurdity by not.
But he treats absurdity like it's just something every day. Like something is said absurd, and he doesn't make a point of its absurd. He says something absurd as if like, of course.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think you touched on something. I think the subtlety of the language in the poetry is really. I mean, like one little detail that just sort of struck with me when I was reading. You sent me that essay about the Apollinaire songs, and in the third one, about le cinéma, they said that throughout the poem, the first time the word is cinématographie, which is its full formal title.
Yep.
Then the next time,
and those are the old people.
Yeah,
they remember it the old way.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the stuffy formal way. Yeah. And then the next time it's mentioned, it's cinéma. Yeah, exactly, which is the more when the middle class had access to it. And then finally, the last time, it's ciné.
Yeah.
Which is like the sort of youth slang.
Yeah.
Word for it. And it's like it's language going from being like stuffy and formal and like slowly kind of like digressing into sort of like the popular, into the masses.
Yeah.
And I feel like that perfectly sort of, and Poulenc, when you know that and you look at how Poulenc sets each of those words, he always highlights it in a way that you can only realize when you know that detail.
I mean, early 20th century Europe is reeling. And I think that like Poulenc and the Impressionists and any of the artists of the time, because they all intermixed, they understood that like kind of grandiose themes get you in trouble. It seems to me. Now, the more I read, I mean, when I dip into Poulenc for this concert, it's like then you kind of dip into, and then you accumulate various projects, and certainly an opera, you accumulate a bit of knowledge about time periods, and like the impact they have and why that's important. And I think it's pretty. So you have the biographical sketch of the man, and I think one of the fascinating things for me is that we as musicians will approach his music and be fascinated by all these intricate the intricate tonality and all these things that he's able to find that are different. Because there's a lot of music out there. There's a lot of being played. There's a lot of chances being taken at that time.
Yeah.
And somehow Poulenc maybe not as recognized as anyone could ever be in their time. But I think with more appreciation now of having kind of a further view of that time period, what he was able to encapsulate in his music is pretty extraordinary and represent at the time a literary movement, which was actually taking many themes kind of out of the clouds and putting them so close to the dirt that everybody had access to them.
Yeah.
Which really sets up that bohemian. It kind of ramps up that, but it's almost like they were, Poulenc, it seems, wanted to kind of show timelessness in mundane things.
Yeah.
Expression of your feelings about a lover or the Gaillard that are set really 17th century. We'll update that to early 20th century, and certainly you think of speakeasies in the United States. Wow, that's basically a caricature of what was happening in the 20s in America.
Yeah.
Let alone in France and Paris, where you would think, well, there'd be scandalous pornography and things. There was plenty of that going on here too, and so it's kind of cool now to sing this in Brooklyn, where there would have been a lot of that going on.
Exactly.
Those sounds would have been alive and well. There's certainly artists in Brooklyn now that are similar, I guess, in that you think of all the art that's out there now that's kind of all this macro, close. Well, they're just getting closer because we have more access, and I think that's the cool thing about Poulenc is that when you take and I guess the pianist certainly because it's virtuosic playing, and the singer as well, because there's such a dexterity between the notes and the language that you have to take a magnifying glass in a way that you don't take a magnifying glass. The French writers at the time certainly made you do that.
Yeah.
In a way that you don't necessarily have to with a Schubert tune.
Yeah, I think there's there's an idea Flaubert, the French author, had an idea of le mot juste, the kind of the perfect word, and he would sit. And I always get sometimes in some of the Poulenc songs, I feel like there's certain chords, like that last chord of offering of not offering of
Affront.
Affront,
Yeah.
where it's that's the chord juste,
Yeah.
it's the exact right chord, that sort of just picking on one thing. I also think it's interesting to kind of go back to what you were saying, that for a long time Poulenc was really considered he was sort of written off as sort of a very talented and gifted composer, but not a historically important composer. No. He kind of got written off as a conservative.
In his time.
Yeah, as sort of a reactionary. But when you look at the text he's setting, and I think in a lot of ways, yes, he maybe wrote in a more tonal idiom than was sort of in the fashion, especially towards the end of his life when people like Pierre Boulez and Olivier Messiaen were coming into prominence, and he was still basically writing the same style that he was writing in the 1920s. But there's something I always find, just if not in form and intent of his music, that's very radical. That's very purposely trying to push buttons in a certain way. That's being purposely, subversive. Maybe in a slyer, kind of undermine, not in an overt Boulez way, where it's just this massive sound in your face that's really aggressively ugly just for the sake of for its own sake. But in other ways, I think he does undermine a lot of conventions and a lot of aesthetic understandings about what is proper in music.
Well, yesterday I was reading Alex Ross's recent piece in the New Yorker. I sound like such a snob, but Alex Ross is a fabulous writer. Yeah. So he wrote about Beethoven, and one thing that really struck me was when he talked about how he's been deified, and how, but at the time that he was writing, and then when he died, of course, that deification happened fairly swiftly, and so he ruined every composer's life for 100 years because everyone had and you think about Beethoven's music is so strictly, it adheres to Beethoven alone. He's so far apart of like
Yeah.
from everyone that like he stands even above the music as like a god above it, right? Poulenc is of his time, and Poulenc represented his time very, very well.
Yeah.
And Poulenc also, I think, had a luxury like Britain did of having, I guess when you would talk about the vocal music, having Pierre Bernac, because he had someone that he could write for.
Yeah.
And not only write for, but that he trusted with his music. So like you have all these little, I mean the Apollinaire songs, the four of them last 4.5, 4:45 or something. They're short, and like I remember telling you the first rehearsal we had that when you're singing one and you're learning it note by note, the process obviously is longer than the finished product, but it's exceptionally longer.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a routine for learning things, and it takes a certain amount of diligent, slow practice. But like even when you start to work on the pieces up to tempo, and with a little bit of flair, they still. The only time I'm astonished about their brevity is that when we sing them through.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, there ain't much, or I listen through them without thinking about text and without thinking. When I sing them through, they're extraordinarily short.
They're like a minute each.
And he does that all. I mean, the Gaillards are the same thing. Like it's kind of astonishing because you have someone that takes lots of snapshots of and sometimes absurd poetry, sometimes touching poetry.
Yeah.
There's a few of the Gaillards that are actually somewhat tender in their perversion, I
Yeah.
guess. And he takes, instead of kind of drawing it out, he really, and this is kind of plays into the lack of rubato, really, basically, or the lack of markings for any of that. I think that he didn't want you to linger too long on any given subject. He wanted to make his mark and get on with it. And it's interesting. I don't get the impression that he's a person writing for the prestige necessarily.
Yeah.
I think he's proud of his work, but I think he's a man of his time. It seems to me. And
I find it interesting. I feel like there's certain types of artists. Like there's certain types of artists who have something. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Something universal or timeless about their art.
Yeah.
Where, like maybe, like you can argue like Bach or Mozart, but even them, I don't know. I think there's always with all great art there, and always sort of like a tension between how much they're a product of their time and how much they're just like reflecting their own time, and how much they're universal. How much
setting themselves apart from the time that they were writing.
And in a weird way, the more an artist captures their own time, like the more accurately they capture their own time, the more they stand the test of time in a very weird, counterintuitive way. Because the more perfectly they kind of get the spirit of their time, somehow that, to me, transfers more easily to universality than like trying to just talk about like people, like mankind in general, or doing something just that's aspiring to be quote unquote universal.
Yeah, I think universal values and certainly universal qualities exist, and they're very important. But in terms of music, it's like any argument that's is produced, anything that's produced from a locale, a geographic location, is special to that place.
Mm-hmm.
Even within, say, like the U.S., there are distinct areas in states. There are distinct areas.
Yeah.
And so it's like you wouldn't say honky tonk. There's some really great honky tonk happening in Canada. You wouldn't encourage someone to go to Texas to hear alt rock.
Yeah.
You would find it there, but it's not. There isn't an identity. And so like I think Poulenc represents Parisian early 20th century values. Or not necessarily values, but an aesthetic. And I don't even know if the aesthetic mattered to him. Like, I think that you find so much nuance, and you find much subtlety, much humor, and much crass language, certainly in crass, in some, like we said, wrong chords. Somehow he makes them great. Like, and I think the reason Poulenc matters is because he balances pretty much every human emotion pretty not only does he balance them, but he represents them fairly accurately, and that creates universality.
Sure.
So that's why it can jump the ocean, and that's why, you know, Poulenc wants to come here. That's why Britain wanted to come here, because where was all of that, like, where was all, like, the ideas that they had that were fresh or representative of France, but maybe they wanted to go further, maybe they wanted to go to the next level, and that's why you see a lot of these at this time period, you see a lot of them coming here.
Yeah.
Because I think here, here you would have heard jazz, and when you listen to a Britain or a Poulenc score, after they travel, I'm sure you find, and that's the mark of a great person, let alone a composer.
I think that's really, above anything else, I think Poulenc's music always rings true.
Yeah.
Like there's a sort of mark of sincerity in it that is unique, I think. Not unique to Poulenc, but his brand of truth. It's very Poulencian.
A Wolf.
Yeah.
Comes to mind. Like someone that didn't write. Certainly he writes broad works, but a lot of his works are
a minute long. Right?
Yeah, they're short and they're full. It's not like they're not. It might be a minute of your life, but it takes you an hour of your time to figure out.
It's like a minute of your life, but you're like different after that minute, which I feel like is.
It impacts you for a lot longer than a minute.
Yeah.
And hey, every composer has shit. If that's but but I don't Poulenc is great composers, I suppose, are set apart when they get out of their where they're writing, when they become well known across a broader spectrum. I think that is where you find kind of universality in music and in art generally. Like we respect somebody that so accurately can kind of infect the ear and turn on the brain. With not the sounds, the sounds attract, for me, a couple of these Apollinaires start on the beat, right, with you and I, and so we have to be the very beginning, and certainly even the last one, the third one as well.
Yeah.
You're starting like on the gun, and so you almost feel like it's almost conversational because of the brevity of each piece, and because of how they kind of start. You're very quickly thrust into the situation, and you're very quickly rushed out of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the songs, now that you mention that, they really feel like it's not a complete song, in the sense it feels like a lot of them, like they started a long time before and they end sometime after, and it's like you just kind of get
just picked up on.
Yeah, it's just like you came in the middle of, especially like Avant le Cinema, because it literally like it starts in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
It's like it starts like, and then we went to the movies, and
yeah.
like there was clearly supposed to be a bunch of stuff before that. You don't know what it is. So that's why I think a lot of the songs feel bigger than they are, because they feel like a chunk of something
bigger. Broader. Yeah.
Which is a very cool effect that I hadn't even thought about. Or like, in 1904, it sort of starts it doesn't feel like that's the beginning of the song. It just feels like there's a song going, and it's almost like, reminds me of, it's like, in the movies when like, people, they go through the door and the door's open and there's like a big party that had been going on for hours before, and you just happen to walk in at that moment.
Yeah.
And that's when your sort of consciousness of what's going on happens, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't happening before.
And you have some of these, Apollinaire, some of the reading I've done on these talks about, I think it was Graham Johnson talks about the fact that he was there. Mm-hmm. The cinema, the 1904 in Strasbourg, they're there. And so he's just basically at the sketch.
Yeah.
And it's kind of enriching to basically, like you're saying, kind of narrate a chunk of a scene.
Yeah.
Of maybe 5 minutes of the day of the poet, and then certainly Poulenc, I'm sure he labored, but it seems almost in listening and hearing, and I haven't read.
He captures
quickly. I don't know how long he would have labored over something like the Apollinaire songs or the Gaillard. How many days, weeks, months it would have taken him to. But it seems to me they're so quick-witted that. It seems to me they
feel spontaneous.
They flowed out, yeah. They were just, and that's kind of, I think, the other time I've sung Gaillard, I think as a artist you can hear how people laugh or react to a piece, even in the way they clapped, how it touched them collectively, and then it's interesting how in the Gaillard songs, the thing that struck me the one time I sang them publicly was the laughter. Mm-hmm. And the laughter is twofold. And this is the kind of, some of these curt a little bit offensive, the text. I think it's one of those really cool things in an American audience where the process of reading it through, and if you're a person that goes and you read them through first, and then you have an idea of like what you're in for, and then you hear it in context of the piece, and then you kind of maybe quickly, like while it's going on, or if something catches your ear, you go back and see, was that what it said?
Yeah.
And then and it's cool that how quickly the audience member, and it happens to me as well as you prepare them, where you're touched by. Maybe your laughter is kind of like almost an offended laughter, kind of like, huh, oh, you know, or you're a person that's kind of wired that way, and you find that representation of that moment kind of just absolutely like spot on, and that laughter is discernible. And then there's the people that laugh heartedly because it's damn funny.
Yeah.
And that's a discernible laughter, and certainly that informs your opinion of the piece generally. And the thing I find, you know, if I discuss the Gaillard with a pianist or another singer that's done them, immediately that kind of Cheshire Cat smile happens, where like you as a singer, the person that like spent time with the text, you know just how, or you've allowed it to grow the piece in such a way that you know what, you know, you're at least informed enough that you know what those different laughters are about.
Yeah.
Or you kind of at least have enough information to know that like Poulenc and Apollinaire have given you, and the text from Gaillard have given you, the author has given you an opportunity to have one of those quick moments of kind of like, oh, in a snapshot, not a long piece. I mean, you know, anything that's 3 to 5 minutes, it requires a lot of work, and like you might forget sections. Like movies, you know, you have your favorite parts. No one ever says like, let me walk you from beginning to end, because our brains can't take that much. But we are good at short. Yeah. We're good at short macro. We're good at like, give me a lot of information in a short burst, and human brains are meant for that. We're quick like that. And Poulenc gives you a perfect, and because he had great writers, he gives you, he contextualizes things very neatly. And he doesn't take anything away. He just leaves it as it is. And I think it's kind of when he does write, he marks very specifically. Yeah. He's like Britain that way. And like, there's no getting around it. And what he's trying to do is, he's trying to make sure that you don't get too fussy about just how normal and commonplace, and even if it's crass or beautiful, how commonplace this all is, and that everything happens chaotically in tandem. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I have to say, what the effect on the audience, like the audience that I'm most proud of getting, is like, and I've probably only truly gotten it like 3 or 4 times, is like laughter at something that's funny. When you can get, because I feel like in classical music, in just the way the sort of enshrined sort of tradition of it is like, laughter is verboten, or it's like, because laughter is like kind of the ultimate spontaneous reaction to it, and it's like there's some kind of wall, for better or for worse, probably mostly for worse, that's put up against spontaneous reaction in classical music. So when you get, so people are already like, they're like consciously trying to damp down, to stop their just spontaneous reaction. So when they do laugh, it's like, it was so compelling that it like overrode their like
formality,
and they just, and it feels right. And I like, I've never got an audience to laugh at something that was supposed to be funny and get a laugh out of it, unless I like nailed it.
Yeah, you have to.
If I wasn't like 100% dead on, like the humor, it might have been effective or fine, but to get people, like an audience, to laugh, and often I find they don't laugh because, I think they laugh purely as a response to 2 things. Probably the facial expressions, or like the or the gestures of the singer, which kind of embody the comedy, and probably more importantly, like the timing. Like, you can kind of ape comedic timing without there even really being like, even if the joke is in a foreign language, you can ape the timing of humor. Just have it be like, a certain way. And people could really respond to that, even if they don't understand, even if they don't even think on the level of like, that was a funny joke.
Right.
They're just like, that timing spoke to me, like conveyed something funny in like this broad sense.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like when you read about the Gaillard, and there's or even in the Apollinaire songs, there is the sense of pun.
Yeah.
So as a non-speaker, you go, man, I wish I would have spent more time studying French. But here's the thing: like, if I don't live in France, and I don't read French text, and I don't read French newspapers, and I don't talk to French friends, and I don't have a French experience that's in France, and I don't have a sense of history and all these things, I don't know French famous people. When I read that now, I used to like get really worried and start become all student about it. I go find a bunch of texts and like read about what the puns mean, and then suddenly now I'm an informed singer. And actually, I have to, I guess, admit something publicly. You know, I guess I'm not ashamed. I'm kind of one of those. You know, I can go and get. I can go to the airport and spend $10 and have someone at one of those little massage stations like quick, release a little, like push on my back a little bit. Or I can go for an hour and get like a deep, like someone smart and set up an appointment and get a deep, like Swedish massage that like actually does a beneficial thing for me. And like I feel like Poulenc does more thoroughly well. Gives you that hour massage, and he gives you an opportunity. He colors very quickly in these songs. He colors that text, which is in most cases quite brief as well, short snippets. What he adds in the piano, what he adds and certainly in the way he sets the text, he adds the substance that makes up for not knowing the language, not necessarily having a complete understanding of even that short text yet because you've done one cursory reading and one follow along in the concert. There'll be several people in the audience at any given concert that knows a piece well enough or has a relationship enough with it to say, I have an opinion not only on the way I just heard it, but just generally about the piece. And I think that's the neat thing when you're representing like you are with the Brooklyn Project. You are giving people a taste of Parisian life, France, Paris, whatever, but you're also giving them, like you were talking about, an opportunity to emote almost spontaneously, because in that short hour and a half of that music, you're going to hear kind of, I guess the only word I mean gaiety.
Yeah.
There's like a real, because even
the joie de vivre, I think, is a good.
And I think that's, I guess my impression of French people is, the people that I know that are French, actually French, they have so much life.
Yeah.
And when they're dark, they're funny or witty in a way that like makes you feel like they might have more colors and brushes in the bag than people from other parts of the world. And the cool thing is I feel like, I also feel that the French are very welcoming of people wanting to know as much as they want to know about France. So, there's always a nationalism about it, but artistically, it's pretty neat to sing the French music. Always. Debussy, Dupac, Fauré. Like, there's something about the French music, for me, a baritone, and they seem to write very well for a lyric baritone. All the composers, there's something something extraordinary. And Poulenc is just another one, but he really is, for me now, becoming someone set apart. I don't sing a lot of it, but the experience I've had with Poulenc has been special because of all the stuff we've talked about. For me, mostly, it's what a great way for me as someone that really appreciates, say, the short, maybe perverse stuff in Gaillard, and the witty, pun-filled stuff in the Apollinaire songs. What an interesting introduction, a great introduction to that poetry and to that kind of music through that vessel of Poulenc. And even the French, which I don't study diligently enough and don't speak, but now it excites me to really, because you can't get away. You listen to Pierre Bernard sing any of this stuff, there's no room for error. There will be people can pick on my French. I won't be perfect, but because it's set so perfectly, and because it's been represented so well by great singers, it's you have to do your homework, or you will be left in the dust. And for me, that's the mark of a genius. Not someone that was trying to trick you, but someone that gave you enough information so that even as long as you do your work, you will represent the piece as it should be. That's, I think, the brilliance, the absolute genius that we are now discovering more than ever of Britain.
Yeah.
Is very much the same way, and it's their contemporaries. And the fantastic thing about that is that, and I think they recognize that in each other and in their respect of each other's music, that they were, a lot of people brushed specifically but broadly the classical romantic people.
Yeah.
They tried to wrap every single thing in their arms, and like I think what Poulenc mastered was magnifying glass. And you know those the bottles. Oh, we have one of these right here where it's stuffed full of like rocks and sand and little weird figurines, colors, and that's Poulenc. Poulenc's one of those like dioramas of a street scene.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to like figure out how to die, Poulenc's telling us how to live little by little and well.
And there is that sense, the kaleidoscopic sense, like in learning a lot of, especially the Apollinaire, more than the Apollinaire songs than the Chansons de Galliard. There's like, you realize the accompaniment figure in some of the songs changes every like 2 measures. It's like a certain it's a certain rhythm or a certain pattern, and then 2 measures later it's completely different. There's that sort of like a street scene where it's like there's all these things going on and no one particular one is the focus. It's just like so it's just like a bunch of stuff, and you as it's a cool effect where like you as the listener or you as the viewer of the scene can pick what you think is important or what speaks to you. Yeah. You don't have to.
Yeah. I mean that's how we look. That's how we see the world.
Yeah.
When you ask interestingly now, with the proliferance of cameras, everyone's got a camera and everyone takes pictures. You can tell the people that are kind of just because it covers the spectrum. Like a lot of people for a long time have taken pictures. There's a difference between people that are handicapped by like I can only take 24 on the roll.
Yeah.
And I've only brought 6 rolls on the trip.
Yeah.
So I'm only going to be able to get so many things in. Yeah. And so you have a lot of family gatherings that are like family huddled people together. And like people huddled around objects at like a zoo and in those people you could find artists, everyday people, artists. But now everybody's taking pictures of everything. It's the same people the pictures that are interesting are the ones that capture the intimate, more macro detail of a person's life. And when you look at those, some people you have to look at a lot of their pictures to kind of get an idea of who they are beyond like selfies. But Poulenc gives us kind of an opportunity to see every little bit of detail in every picture that he takes, and he uses the poems to do that. But it's pretty extraordinary how he is setting songs that there are poetry that it doesn't allow you to have a one-word response.
Yeah.
That's kind of the.
I think Poulenc, now that you bring that up, I think Poulenc would be really in, and I think all of Lacey's, I think that generation would be really into this idea now of like sort of like how like because of smartphones and Instagram. Like everyone's kind of an artist. Like everyone takes everyone just like sees things that they think are beautiful and just takes a picture of it. Yeah, and just
that I guess was the point of my whole diatribe there. I apologize.
Like I think that they would be so into that idea that it's not just like the lofty high artists who are creating beauty, capable of creating beauty through like years of study in the conservatoire or whatever. I think just the idea that like any old schmo can just push a button and capture something really beautiful. Yeah. That. I think the essence of Lacey and Poulenc is that that which is beautiful is not something high on this ivory tower far away from like the common man, but it's just something that everyone has experience with. It's the things on the street. Like that song 1904, The Last of the Opponent, it's literally just him just like listing a bunch of stuff he sees. Yeah. It's just like I'm just walking around and I see this, I see this, I see that. Like and like there's nothing special about this, but the beauty is just like it's just all around you. That this idea that like art is not something that's in a museum that the stuffy elite go to. It's on the streets and and wherever.
Combining those poems that you mentioned that with cinema, which is basically like how are the new generations calling it? Like what groups?
Yeah.
What groups are how are groups messing with our language?
And a common theme again in Poulenc is this idea of like the new generation, new, and just like things constantly being new and constantly changing. And I think in the turn of the 20th century, when Apollinaire was writing, and like sort of the beginning of modernity, I think one of the defining features of like modernity is that for most of human history, things were basically the same for people's entire life. Like if you were born in like 1400, and when you died in like 1470. But like 1450 or 50, like
if you made it,
nothing was that different about the world. Like there was pretty much the same technology.
There wasn't a major shift, quick major shift.
But starting at in the 1900s, and like with the sort of with the Industrial Revolution, all of a sudden, like within one person's life, things changed more radically than they could possibly keep track of.
Yeah.
And that feeling of things like really,
Well, the frenetic kind of never ceasing
like, yeah,
change.
like Émile Zola has this book, Le Bête Humaine, and the sort of metaphor in the book is this, at the end of the book there's a train that like, the gears break on the train, so the train is just like hurtling through and it can't stop, and there's like a party going on with these soldiers who just got off from war, and so there's this giant like wild party going on. And on this train, with no brakes, it can't stop. And I feel like that is encapsulated in the text of Apollinaire and in the music of Poulenc, this sort of like manic forward. We're always talking in rehearsal, like move it forward. It has to move forward. And a lot of Poulenc's tempo markings are marked seemingly unreasonably fast.
Yeah, stop waiting.
Yeah,
it's basically what he sums up most of his markings, which is no nuance. Well, what does nuance end up doing? It ends up elongating many times.
Yeah.
Especially, that's in.
There was the geist of the period. This feeling, the spirit of the time was there's no stopping and reflecting. There's just forward, just moving forward, just keep going. And I think that it's not just the tempo markings in Poulenc are not just like a number. They're not just like here. This is the beat that the metronome needs to go out when you're practicing. They represent that sort of.
It's an intention.
Even if you don't play it exactly that speed, it's not about the speed. It's about the feeling of like you're not resting. You're always moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great way. I mean, that's a great way to just sum it up. Is that it's always onwards.
Mm-hmm.
It's never you don't get a whole lot of time to sleep on it.
Yeah, and in the spirit of always onwards, I think since we're low on wine,
cheers.
We might. End this edition of Song and Wine. So, if you've made it this far, details of the concert, October 24th, Friday, 8 p.m., Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. All Poulenc. It's opening night. There's a silent auction with some really cool prizes. You should definitely check it out. And we'll see you on the next episode of Song and Wine, where we discuss Darius Milhaud. So, thanks for watching.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Au revoir.